Ladies and gentlemen, my good friend Steve Goldbach.
Good morning, everyone. Well, it's good to be back on the Brandworks stage, the most awkward stage in the world on which to present. I feel like I'm on a giant lazy Susan here. You know, I'll just slowly rotate around to see each of you, and that's the prerequisite stage comment. Now we can get with the program here. So let's start with a game. This is audience participation, so please shout out the answers. And the game is certain or uncertain. So I'm going to present you with a series of statements, and you have to say whether or not you're certain about the statement or you're not sure, you're a little uncertain. Got it? Pretty simple game. Okay, start with an easy one, I think. The earth is round and not flat. Certain. Okay, that was easy. Good. All right, start with another one. It's kind of like those first few questions on a lie detector test, just to get the gauge of your pulse and stuff. The moon is not made of green cheese, even in Wisconsin. Okay? Certain, right? Certain. Okay. Let's try one. Just only a slightly bit harder, I think. Consumers have dramatically changed how they communicate with brands in the last 10 years. Certain, right? Everyone pretty much knows it. Every presenter at these kinds of conferences has to have their requisite slide that says, look how different the world is as if we're telling you something you don't already know. Yes, we know the world has changed. Got it. Check. Got it. That box is checked. Let's try one that's just a slight bit harder, maybe. Marketing tactics work as a system to influence customer behavior. So they work together, not in silos. So TV influences online, online influences how you perceive radio, radio influences how you perceive outdoor. Certain or uncertain? Certain. Uncertain. Why do you say uncertain, sir? They're supposed to. That doesn't mean they always do. But the vast majority of folks kind of said certain. Is that right? Certain. They work together as a system, or they're supposed to. Fair enough. So, if they work together as a system, and we know that customers are behaving very differently and communicating very differently, we should expect to see very different marketing systems than, say, 10 years ago, right? We should expect that. Well, I've pulled uncertain. Now, those of you who saw the last time I presented at Brandworks, I shared these data. So this is the top 100 advertisers in the United States and their measured media mix allocation per ad age. Okay, so that's what it looked like. It was lots of TV, a little bit of print, and then a smattering of radio, outdoor, and digital. Again, this is the top 100 advertisers, and I picked that because I think it's representative of the kinds of companies that are in this room, big-ish companies. Okay, 2009, a little bit more digital, but if you ask me, that's the same system, right? Not much different in 2011. Now, for the first time ever, digital surpassed newspapers, but if you look at the data as a system and not at individual media, that's the same system. So if we believe that it's certain that marketing tactics work together to influence behavior, and that customers have dramatically changed how they communicate with brands, shouldn't we, as a marketing community, be behaving differently? And so that's something I want to explore today, which is you would expect, because everybody is so sure about all the things that we just described, yet their behavior is actually not there. So one of the problems, I think, is this concept of optimum spend. So I got another question for the audience, which is, how do you know when you hit optimum spend? Any thoughts? This is audience participation, remember? How do you know when you hit optimum spend? Now, what we've done historically has been try to create models, marketing mix models, regression models, analytical models, attribution models, to demonstrate to us that It's a representation of the world, and we think our spend is optimized based on the output of these marketing mix models. Okay? But they are a representation of the real world, and they're our best representation, and they're getting a lot better. The computing power, analytics, the amount of data that we can process is getting a lot better. But at the end of the day, optimum spend is kind of like the Loch Ness Monster. We can't actually see it. Okay? We can't observe it in the real world. It's kind of like Snuffleupagus before they revealed him, right? He would go away. And optimum spend is kind of like that, because even if you were to be able to observe it, presumably the moment that you hit optimum spend, your competitor would do something to react, and then your spend would no longer be optimal because you'd have to re-optimize it. Okay? So optimum spend as a concept and the models that we've built to describe it, in some respect, are, I believe, getting in the way of doing what we need to do as marketers and change the system of marketing tactics that we're using to change consumer behavior. In some respects, the marketing mix models that we historically have used, those which measure the performance or the attribution of individual media against sales or against profit, are kind of like trying to understand the impact of cellist number 4 on the overall orchestra, right? It's really hard to do. It's really hard to tease apart the impact of it, especially because at the end of the day, it kind of doesn't matter. It's the orchestra, how the orchestra sounds that matters, not the individual components of the orchestra. It's the same with the marketing plan. It's does the plan together drive your sales, drive your profits, as opposed to what does the individual media do. However, because we've got tools, and they're very high quality analytical tools that we have, very high powered tools, organizations cling to them, right? We love our tools, and we're going to use them even if we don't think they're perfect, even if we don't think they're valid. In fact, we use them so painfully, I believe they're part of the issue that has prevented us from responding fast to the changes that have gone on to the marketplace. So consumers are changing much more rapidly than marketers are changing. I believe we're in a bit of a vicious cycle that we need to break. Okay? The first piece of the cycle is marketers do recognize that we need to use different tactics. We said so here at the start of this. We are certain customers are behaving differently. We are certain. There's no debate about it. They're behaving differently. Okay? We're certain, and therefore we need to use different tactics. But then we're told, usually by finance, that we have to prove it works before we change anything. So before we've ever done anything, we have to show that it's worked. It's like, hang on a second, we haven't done anything, but I have to demonstrate to you that to do something different in the face of overwhelming evidence that consumers are also different, I have to prove it. Okay, I'll figure out a way to prove something I've never done before. Got it. Okay, so prove it. A colleague of mine, Larry Keeley, who spoke here last year, said the best way to destroy innovation is use the word prove it and innovation in the same sentence. Okay? But we're asked to constantly prove our investments in new marketing tactics. And then what happens is, well, because they're unproven, we can't spend a lot of money on them. Right? We're just going to test them. We're going to put them in a little box over here called a test, and we're going to do it in Peoria or Springfield or somewhere, and we're going to just sit it there in a test market, and we're not going to really integrate it with anything else we're doing. We're just going to test it a little bit. So it's not surprising that poorly funded tests measured by models that were designed with historical data that are fed by things that don't look the same don't perform very well. Okay? So the model results that we get when we put them into the models that are based on all those historical data, okay, don't warrant large changes in spend. And as a result, the senior executives declare it doesn't work. Okay? It's still not proven. We need to test it some more. Well, if you ask me, we've been testing it since 1999. We know that consumers are behaving differently. So what we need to do is stop focusing on optimizing spend. That's something we can't see, and just focus on getting it moving in the right direction. Okay? Just focus on getting it going in the right direction, take the word optimizing out of our vocabulary because we can't see it, we can't measure it. We just need to make sure that we're moving the performance of our marketing systems in the right direction. And what I want to dedicate the rest of this talk to is a few practical things that you can do to start to move the needle in the right direction in your organizations. So 3 things are: have a behavior objective. And I'm going to talk about what I mean by that. 2 is leverage A/B type experiments. And someone mentioned this yesterday as one of the things. I think these are a great tool for marketers to steal from the world of web design. Okay? And 3 is make data collection part of your engagement strategy. Okay? I'm going to talk about why that's critical and why I think that will be something that will separate the winners and losers going forward. So let's start with have a behavior objective. Behavioral objective for me is the foundation of any good marketing strategy. And that's actually one of the places I'd like to start. Okay? Is let's discuss what is actually changing. What is the impact of this deluge of data and analytics, this big data? I never really understood what was big about it. It's just lots of data. It's not bigger than ever before. But what's changing is precision, the precision with which I can measure things. I can get really precise about which consumer I'm targeting, what specific behavior I want to measure, what they're doing, where they are. I can be really precise. And I can do it really fast. Okay, so at the end of the day, the major shifts are about precision and speed. But there's a heck of a lot of things that aren't changing about marketing. Joe Laszlo talked about this yesterday. What's not changing? You still need to have a clear brand strategy. Okay? Where to play, how to win. Okay? You still need to have a well-defined customer target. You want to know who you're trying to delight, what their drivers and barriers are, what motivates them, what they love, what their unmet needs are, everything to know about them. You needed to do that before, you needed to do that now. Okay? You still need to have a compelling value proposition for your brand, and you still need to be able to communicate that value proposition through messages that resonate. Okay? But the point is that the stuff that isn't changing should be the stuff that influences the stuff that is changing. So your strategy, your value proposition, the behaviors you're trying to change, your messages should be all the things that drive what data and analytics you need to collect in this world, not the other way around. Okay? Your strategy needs to drive the metrics. What you're trying to do in the marketplace should say, how am I going to measure that? It's a hand-in-glove kind of solution to be able to say, what's my strategy and how am I going to measure success? In fact, having a clear strategy is the one tool that will help you clearly separate the signal from the noise. And from a marketing perspective, the foundation of a clear strategy, for me, is for your customer target, what is your behavior objective? And a behavior objective is the thing that you're asking the customer to do differently or do the same. As marketers, our role is to influence behavior. We need to either change behavior in our favor, or we need to get customers to do similar things that they're doing. And fundamentally, we believe there's only five core categories for changes in behavior. Then there's lots of sub things that they can do underneath it. For existing customers, so customers who are already in your business, 1, you can get them be willing to pay more or keep buying your product. So increase loyalty, okay, or increase the inelasticity of demand. Okay. 2 is they can buy more for a current occasion. So sitting with the folks from Milk Pep last night, get folks to buy more, to consume more milk at breakfast. Okay, that's an example of a behavior objective, getting consumers to buy more. Buy more for a new occasion. Okay, so think about baking soda. Baking soda for a long time sat in your fridge. We got you to brush your teeth with it. That's buying more for a new occasion. Okay, that'll help grow your brand. Then there's new customers. Okay, the customers that are not in your business today. You can get them to switch from another brand that they're currently buying from that same category, or they're not in your business and they're not in anyone's brand, they're not in the category today, you can get them to enter the category. Okay? How do you know which behavior objective to pick? Okay? A good behavior objective is the singular change which will disproportionately drive growth for your brand. Okay? And I'm going to demonstrate to you an example, okay, that will show you that brands in the same category can have very different behavior objectives that are relevant and appropriate for your brand. But what you want to pick at the end of the day is that change in behavior which will drive your brand's business. Okay, that's what you want to pick, and then you want to go and do everything possible, design your entire marketing plan to change that behavior. Okay, so enough of this serious academic stuff. On your feet. This is the moment in which you're going to make fun of me later, so just memo. Okay? Let's talk about erectile dysfunction. Okay? All right? We all good with that? All right. So I apologize in advance for any unintentional puns that may come out during the course of the next few slides. Okay? But the market for erectile dysfunction, as we probably most know and don't discuss on a daily basis, started in about 2000 or so with the advent of Viagra. Okay? And for a long period of time, Viagra sort of defined the market for ED pills. Okay? You went to your doctor, okay, and you asked for some help, and for the most part, the doctor prescribed Viagra for the first part of that journey from 2000 to about 2005. Okay, Viagra was by far the market leader, had something like 90% market share at the beginning of the decade. And then by 2006, when I'm picking up the story here, we've got a three-way market. That was completely unintentional and unplanned. Okay. We've got between Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra. Okay? But I'm going to focus on the different behavior objective for Viagra and Cialis. Interestingly, both Viagra and Cialis in 2006 spent about $100 million on measured media. Okay? So you'd say, well, it's like, well, you know, they're spending about the same, but they've got very different market shares. So Viagra was about $1.6 billion in sales at the time, clearly still the market leader. About 58% of all prescriptions written were for Viagra. And Cialis was, you know, about 25, 26, 27% of the market, with just under $1 billion worth of sales. This is by 2006. So if you're Viagra and you understand your target's behavior, you understand the dynamics of the market, you have insights into your your patient's behavior and how doctors behave. The insight that Viagra knew, and Cialis understood this too, was that if a patient went to a doctor's office in 2006 and just said, "Doc, I need some help," okay, then the patient would very much likely walk out with a Viagra prescription. Okay, about 65% of unbranded requests to a doctor resulted in a Viagra prescription. So it made sense for Viagra's behavior objective to grow the market. Okay, that's what they were trying to do. They wanted to get more guys to go to the doctor. So the message was not about Viagra. It was just talk to your doctor. Talk to your doctor. They wanted to get guys who aren't in the category to enter the category because they knew that that disproportionately benefited them. So that was their behavior objective, type 5. Cialis, on the other hand, understood this too. And Cialis said, okay, well, we know that if a guy walks into a doctor's office and just says, "Doc, I need some help," he's going to walk out of there with Viagra. So Cialis said, okay, what we need to do is be different. Okay, we need to give guys a reason to ask for Cialis, because the other corollary to the insight about an unbranded request was that a branded request almost always went filled for the brand. So you rarely went to a doctor's office, asked for a brand, and walked out with something different. So Cialis' behavior objective was to get guys to go into the doctor's office and ask for Cialis, specifically. Okay? And the target that they focused on was getting Viagra users to switch to Cialis. Okay? So type 4 and a little bit of type 5. Okay? But they wanted their patient to ask for Cialis. So what they did was they focused their messages on the differences and the benefits of using Cialis over Viagra. So for instance, Viagra has an efficacy time of about 4 hours after you take the pill, and Cialis In France, the nickname for Cialis is the weekender, because you can take the pill and you're good for the whole weekend, apparently. So that's the nickname for Cialis. So they were messaging around the benefits of Cialis relative to Viagra. Okay? So let's fast forward a little bit here. And by the way, both of those behavior objectives made very good sense for those brands at that moment in time. Right? That was the best way for them to grow their business. Okay? Now in 2011, we see the dynamics have shifted. For the first time, Cialis has overtaken Viagra as the market leader. Why did this happen? Okay, why did this happen? Well, the rate of growth of the category slowed. Okay, it started to level off. There were fewer guys who were entering the market. Okay, there were fewer guys who were entering the market, and as a result, Viagra's strategy of talk to your doctor became less effective for their growth. Okay, and Cialis's strategy of brand preference became more effective. So there were more guys in the category who had experiences, who were willing to experiment with different ED treatments. As a result, Cialis started to grow and Viagra started to shrink, okay, in terms of share. The point is about behavior objective, okay, the point is that you need to continually examine whether or not your behavior objective remains relevant for that time and place, and set up your metrics and the data and the analytics that you want to use to support testing whether or not that behavior objective remains relevant or you're achieving your behavior objective. Perhaps Viagra might have changed course, might have changed course over the last 5 years had it seen that there were fewer guys entering the category. It's also possible they chose to say, we're going to be off patent soon. We just want to continue to grow and not spend as much money because we're continuing to grow share anyways. But that's an example of a place where you can have very strong behavior objective, very appropriate, two different brands, same category, but that is the foundation for what you need to determine what metrics and analytics you get. So that's thing one, is behavior objective. Thing two is creating A/B type experiments. So what do I mean by an A/B type experiment? Well, it's pretty simple. You give consumers two options, option A and option B, and relative to your behavior objective, you see which performs better. Okay? Pretty simple. You could probably even do ABC, ABCD. Present them with all kinds of different options. Why do I like A/B testing? Because it's something that you give them in the real world. You set up a real world test. You put things out into the marketplace. It's something that is actually tested in the real world as opposed to something that is modeled and observed. A/B testing has been predominantly used in the field of web development. So Google pioneered this back in the early part of last decade and designed their homepage around it, understood that testing different speeds was critical, but this was one of the ways in which you can just decide between two options, between two real options. Okay? And A/B testing also doesn't suffer from a defect, I think, of classic regression-based marketing mix models, okay? Which is fundamentally, at some respect, marketing mix models, even the most powerful ones today, are only as good as the data you put in them. Let me demonstrate what I mean by that by using some high school math. And a lot of folks have told me, I don't know if I would do this part of the presentation, so this is a bit of a test here to see if it works. Okay, so remember calculus and trig? Everybody's brain hurting already. Okay, so this is classic high school math. So what we've got here on the graph sort of looks like a classic sine curve. Remember, sine curves are the waves that go up and down. And remember, in calculus, you were often asked to find the maximum, right? You took the first derivative and you set it equal to 0, and that was the maximum for that equation. Effectively, that's what marketing mix models are doing. They're trying to fit a curve to a pattern of behavior and then find where the maximum is. And on this graph, okay, which looks like a y equals sine x curve from x equals 0 to x equals 6, it looks like the maximum occurs somewhere between x equals 1 and x equals 2, right? Just power of observation suggests that. Well, here's the problem that I think marketers are facing today, which is they're looking at only a subset of data, okay? So if we take and extend the data, okay, and say we're going to look at behaviors that we don't know, we haven't tried before, it's possible that the maximum might be somewhere far off. So what we actually were looking at before was a curve called y equals 0 plus 0.1, x plus 0.1 times sine x, which is a curve defined as increasing amplitude. Forget about the math for a second. The point is that in the small area that we were looking at, we thought we knew what the maximum was. And in some respects, that's what we're doing today with marketing mix modeling. We're giving them all those examples of data that we have, which are effectively the same marketing system, and putting it in there and determining where the maximum are. But we're not testing dramatically different marketing systems. We're testing similar versions of the same system over and over again, and we might suffer from the problem of just a local maximum. We don't know what we don't know yet. So the point of all this math, okay, is really that a model is only as effective as the data it's fed, okay? Typical marketing mix modeling was regression-based. It's improving dramatically. There's now attribution modeling that takes advantage of computing power to understand the interactive effects that we've talked about, exogenous impacts. But at the end of the day, a model's only as good as the examples that you put into it. And if you're not testing really broadly, you kind of have a bit of a garbage in, garbage out situation. It's not that the model doesn't work, it's not we're not using it to its full potential. So the point that I want to make is that you need to experiment with your whole marketing model, not just silos of it, your whole model. And you should set up these tests, your test dashboard, almost as if it was a big, giant NCAA pool, right? 64 possible marketing plans, each pitted against each other, seeded, and then you go out and test it in the real world, subject to an A/B test, and see which ones perform better. But not ones that are like 69% TV versus 72% TV, because that's really the same marketing system. It's like no TV. How does that work? No TV, all digital, against all TV, no digital. Okay, then we can start to narrow the playing field from there. Okay, and A/B testing, using it in a continual model, will allow you to iterate on your business and continually move the needle, not worrying about optimizing spend, but just moving the needle in the right direction. So let me give an example of a place where where A/B testing and behavioral objectives have been used in combination, I think, pretty effectively. And this is at the Obama campaign, and I do recognize that the Obama campaign in 2008 is a fairly well-described example, but there's very specific things that I want to talk about the campaign. And Eric Schmidt introduced A/B testing that Google had been using for a long time to the Obama campaign. And actually, they were very surprised that the testing yielded that the intuition of the staffers was consistently wrong, actually. So they were very clear about their behavior objective. They understood the system that they were operating in. They wanted to have a system which basically did the following. They understood that they got lots of earned media, because the world of politics basically is the king of earned media, okay? And that free media would perhaps drive lots of people to seek information on the website, okay? And so would the television advertising that they were doing. When they got someone to the website, the key thing that they wanted to do was get the people that visited the website to subscribe to their email. Okay, that way they could have a dialogue with them, and they knew that the more they were able to message directly to a particular target, the more likely that that target was going to donate. They tested lots of different things to be able to move the needle in the right direction from a subscription point of view. They tested simple things like, should the button say sign up or learn more? The staffers thought sign up. That's going to be the best. Well, as it turned out, learn more outperformed sign up by 18%. They tested different pictures. Okay, they tested the classic turquoise picture of Obama versus a black and white photo of Obama and his family. Turns out the black and white photo performed better by 13%. Again, they thought the turquoise one would work. Amazingly, when they used them in combination, learn more plus the turquoise plus the black and white family photo, subscriptions went up by 40%. Okay, so these little mini tests allowed them to get more precise and fast about what would drive visitors to subscribe. What this meant at the end of the day, from an overall perspective, they're using A/B testing. Of the 13 million subscribers that the Obama site got, they attributed about 4 million to a bump from A/B testing. And that resulted in something like $75 million more in donations that went into the coffers to drive more TV, which drove the system. So they truly understood, they truly had a clear behavior objective, and they leveraged testing to do this. You can do this with your marketing plans. This is not just in the world of web design. This is something that you can take your entire campaign and test it against a different version of the same campaign. Okay? Just don't fall prey to testing things that are too close to each other, or you end up with your local Optima problem. You end up that you're not getting broad enough, and I think it's fair to say that in the world where things are moving very quickly, okay, we can't presume that the analytics that were based on observations of the past necessarily play forward. So it's important to continue to expand the scope with which you're testing. The final point I want to make before wrapping up and doing some Q&A is the importance of designing data collection directly into your communication plan. I think this is probably the thing that will most distinguish winners and losers in the future. Okay? I posted to my Facebook page, I often do this before I'm giving a talk like this, asking for examples from the world. I said, does anyone have great examples of companies that are designing, non-retailers, because lots of folks have loyalty programs, non-retailers who are designing data collection directly into their marketing plans? And my favorite response was from a friend of mine in Hong Kong who just wrote, those who aren't equals those who are going out of business. Okay? And I do believe that. Why do I believe that? One is, if you're not designing proprietary data collection into your marketing plans, then you are destined to use the same data sets as your competitors are, which means that you're going to be able to derive the same insights that they are, which means you'll be operating from the same data, which means you'll have to run harder, faster, longer to compete with them. If you're designing proprietary data into your collection, that means you have insights that your competitors don't. And we know that the tool at the end of the day that will drive your business is not the data, but it's the insights that you derive for them. So if you're deriving proprietary data, you'll be able to have proprietary insights. So designing your engagement strategy to yield proprietary data should be a place where, as marketing departments, you're looking to innovate today. That should be the innovation that you're trying to describe. And I know many of you have the reality that you have to go through a retailer or another party to sell your goods. It's still critical to figure out how to do this. I believe every successful company in the future can also be described as a data company. Okay? To finish up, okay? So let's recap. You have to understand the limits of your tools. Okay? I'm not saying marketing mix models or analytics are inappropriate. In fact, they're highly appropriate and can be used to explain past performance particularly well. Okay? But don't ignore your intuition. The one thing I will say about predictive analytics is that they're great when we know that behavior is stable. Okay? Because they take past patterns and they drive them forward. Now, they look for new patterns. Okay? But the thing that will distinguish people is where they can intuit that the puck is moving, said the Canadian. Okay? It's going to a different place. Behavior is changing, and we've all said that the rate of change is accelerating. So don't presume that the insights based on historical observations are just going to continue in the future. Okay? Make sure you've got a valid test design. Be clear about your behavior objective. As Marcia said, write it down. Okay? Write it down so you can test it and revisit it. Make sure that you are, and write it down to make sure that you come back and try to prove yourself wrong. Okay? Experiment outside your comfort zone. We've talked about that a lot. Make sure you're not suffering from the problem of local optima. And then be creative about your data collection. Make it a competitive advantage, because I believe it can be. At this stage, I would love to take your questions. Thank you for your time. If you'd like to continue the conversation, I'm on Twitter. That's my email. And you can drop your business card at the booth to win a free iPad mini if you'd like. So thank you very much. I'll take your questions.
Great question. Great. Questions of Steve? One over here.
Yes.
So one question I have, when you're talking about the A/B variant testing, how do you get comfortable that you're not going to crash the bus? So, for instance, we have a very short campaign window. We want to do A and B variant testing, but, one of the things you advocated for was bringing television way down. Well, if we do that, very short window, and, we could have a significantly negative effect on sales. So how do you get comfortable with making those big changes to test?
Well, first, I would say you could have a very significant positive impact as well, but you don't. But you don't. The point is, you don't know that. You have to design the test in such a way that doesn't bet the business by designing the plan. So I'm not advocating taking the entire business and turning it into a giant A/B test. You've got to look for opportunities to take small parts of the business, but meaningful parts of the business, okay, and test the concept. Okay, this is classic design thinking, fast prototype, get it involved, but it's got to be applied to your marketing mix model, not just applied to web design. So you've got to figure out, how can I test it in a way that gives me a result that would be valid for the rest of my business, and then migrate the business towards there. But I think we often fear the negative a lot more than we look for the positive. So the unknown is feared more than the known, and that's what sort of prevented us from making any moves. But I think the key is to figure out the part of the business to test it on that doesn't bet the business.
Good question. Another one for Steve. I have one. We are seeing a lot of folks out there selling mixed models.
Mm-hmm.
To your point, they might not do what is best. They might just have a point of view or some system that they want you to buy, so you buy it over and over and over again, become dependent on them. What advice would you give these folks who probably need some kind of technology to, what advice would you give them to, for examining these things, for weighing them, to take the broader, larger view as you recommend?
I think the first and most important thing is to understand what the model does and what the model doesn't. So I think the key is you need some folks that understand the limitations and the benefits of the tools. And they're tools, and they can be used appropriately within your marketing plan to evaluate performance, to try to predict it, but you have to understand the limitations of the tool and what their analysis is based on. If they're based on taking historical observations and projecting them into the future or predicting them, or as even as Wes Nichols wrote about in HBR, trying to determine the elasticities of different media and applying them into the future, understand the assumptions of the model. Do they presume that the elasticities carry forward into the future? If so, for how long? And then test those against your observations on the real world. Is that happening? Am I comfortable that that's the bet I want to make? If I'm comfortable that that's the bet that I want to make, then the tool's highly appropriate. If I think we're in a period, like we have been for the last 15 years, of rapid change, maybe looking back, if you think about Facebook, you talked about, or someone talked about yesterday, which of the following 5 things didn't exist? Try to put all those things in your marketing model in a world where those things didn't even exist 5 years. So I think the most important thing when talking with someone who's trying to sell you a tool is understand what the tool is based on, how it does, and how the tool works, and then use it appropriately.
Terrific. Excellent. One question over here.
Do you have any suggestions for B2B businesses with very long sales cycles? Because we currently today we work with a company that sells medical devices and medical software, and we have 12 to 18 month sales cycle, and our measurements today are heavily lead to opportunity to win rate, and that's how our tactics are tied. So do you have any suggestions about how we can measure success, because we have to make decisions on marketing faster than 18 months?
Yeah, it's a challenge with long lead cycles, and I'd say it's not a B2B problem, it's a long sales cycle problem. So I think the principles that I've outlined in this are as applicable for B2B as they are for B2C businesses. Okay, so you need to have a behavior objective, you need to be able to test and hypothesis and design data collection into your interactions with your customers. My advice would be break down that 18-month into measurable chunks. So understand, use ethnographic research to understand how the buying process works, what are the different stages of that process, and then figure out some way in your interactions with your customers through that 18 months to diagnose whether you're moving the needle, and then measure how much you're making progress towards a sale. Because the idea is to move them through the sale, as opposed to, you can't just measure at the end, like this caused this at the end of the day, it's too long. So you need to break that 18 months into measurable chunks and understand which stage you are. And you can only design that relevant for your specific business.
Great, Steve, that was wonderful. One more over here.
Hi, I'm Heidi Freund with CVS Caremark.
Hi,
to
Heidi.
you,
Nice to see you again.
I was actually wondering what your opinion would be on utilizing panels to help make quicker decisions when, going through an A/B experiment.
Sure. I mean, I think, and panels, by that you mean just like, let's stick something in a panel that's going out, or put a few things in an omnibus survey, or, I just want to make sure I'm defining panel the same way you are.
I'm talking about using a panel of customers that you've identified that you go to on a regular basis just to get their opinions.
Sure, I mean, as long as the panel is representative, I think that's exactly what you're in some respects solving this gentleman's problem, which is how do I create an experiment that doesn't bet the business, is do it on a smaller piece of your experiment. I think the panel is a great way to do it. It's a great way to take a small slice of the business and prototype something beforehand. I think a better design would be to have multiple panels and testing different things. But I think at the end of the day, one thing you have to be careful not to do is don't ask the panel what they prefer. Give them something to react to and behave or try to buy, because people are really good at telling you what they think they're going to do, and it's a reliable test, but it's not necessarily as valid a test as giving them something to react to and buy or not. So it's always better. The reason why I much prefer A/B type testing, which is it's effectively simulating it is the real world, right? And all those things that are not measured by our models are measured by that test. We may not be able to splice and dice and understand the piece parts, but we know which system worked better. So multiple panels, as real as possible as real-world effects.
Terrific. Thank you, Steve. That was wonderful.
Thank you.